Hello, welcome to Noetry. My name is Jacob White, and I have prepared some poems and various readings for us today. If you'd like, go ahead and pause the video and get yourself a nice sleepy beverage, or if you're just waking up, perhaps some coffee. And sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Noetry with me. Today we're going to start with one of my favorite poems of all time. And in fact, most of the poems that we'll be reading today are my favorites, as my birthday is this week, and I figured I would treat myself and you. The first poem is by Harold Edward Monro, and it is called Overheard on a Saltmarsh. Nymph, what are your beads? Green glass, goblin, why do you stare at them? Give them me. No. Give them me. No. Then I will howl all night in the reeds, lie in the mud and howl for them. Goblin, why do you love them so? They are better than stars or water, better than voices of winds that sing, better than any man's fair daughter, your green glass beads on a silver ring. Hush, I stole them out of the moon. Give me your beads, I want them. No. I will howl in a deep lagoon for your green glass beads, I love them so. Give them me, give them. No. And now, the definition of birth from Ambrose Bierce's Devil's Dictionary. Birth, noun, the first and direst of all disasters. As to the nature of it, there appears to be no uniformity. Castor and Pollux were born from the egg. Pallas came out of a skull. Galatea was once a block of stone. Paracelsus, who wrote in the 10th century, avers that he grew up out of the ground where a priest had spilled holy water. It is known that Arimaxus was derived from a hole in the earth made by a stroke of lightning. Laomedon was the son of a cavern in Mount Etna, and I have myself seen a man come out of a wine cellar. And now, another favorite poem of mine by John Keats, this titled, This Living Hand. This living hand, now warm and capable of earnest grasping, would, if it were cold, and in the icy silence of the tomb, so haunt thy days and chill thy steamy nights, that thou would wish thine own heart dry of blood, so in my veins red life would flow again, and thou be conscience calmed. See, here it is. I hold it toward you. And now, an early modern ballad of unknown authorship, titled The Unquiet Grave. The wind doth blow today, my love, and a few small drops of rain. I never had but one true love, in a cold grave she was lain. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn all at her grave for a 12-month and a day. The 12-month and a day being up, the dead began to speak. Oh, who sits weeping on my grave, and will not let me sleep? 'Tis I, my love, sits on your grave, and will not let you sleep. For I crave one kiss of your clay-cold lips, and that is all I seek. You crave one kiss of my clay-cold lips, but my breath smells earthy strong. If you have one kiss of my clay-cold lips, your time will not be long. 'Tis down in yonder garden green, love, where we used to walk. The finest flower that e'er was seen is withered to a stalk. The stalk is withered dry, my love, so will our hearts decay. So make yourself content, my love, till God calls you away. And now, a poem by George Gascoigne. And if I did, what then? And if I did, what then? Are you aggrieved, therefore? The sea hath fish for every man, and what would you have more? Thus did my mistress once amaze my mind with doubt, and popped a question for the nonce to beat my brains about. Whereto I thus replied, each fisherman can wish that all the sea at every tide were his alone to fish. And so did I, in vain, but since it may not be, let such fish there as find the gain, and leave the loss for me. And with such luck and loss I will content myself, till tides of turning time may toss such fishers on the shelf. And when they stick on sands that every man may see, then will I laugh and clap my hands, as they do now at me. And now, a poem written by Queen Elizabeth I. The doubt of future foes exiles my present joy, and wit me warns to shun such snares as threaten mine annoy. For falsehood now doth flow, and subjects' faith doth ebb, which should not be if reason ruled or wisdom weaved the web. But clouds of joys untried do cloak aspiring minds, and which turn to rain of late repent by changed course of winds. The top of hope supposed, the root upreared shall be, and fruitless all their grafted guile, as shortly ye shall see. The dazzled eyes with pride, which great ambition blinds, shall be unsealed by worthy wights, whose foresight falsehood finds. The daughter of debate, that discord aye doth sow, shall reap no gain, where former rule still peace hath taught to know. No foreign banished wight shall anchor in this port. Our realm brooks not seditious acts, let them elsewhere resort. My rusty sword through rest shall first his edge employ, to poll their tops that seek such change or gape for future joy. And now a piece written by a man that Queen Elizabeth had killed. This written on the eve of his execution. The author, only 24 years of age, Chidiock Tichborne. My prime of youth is but a frost of cares, my feast of joy is but a dish of pain, my crop of corn is but a field of tares, and all my good is but vain hope of gain. The day is past, and yet I saw no sun, and now I live, and now my life is done. My tale was heard, and yet it was not told. My fruit is fallen, and yet my leaves are green. My youth is spent, and yet I am not old. I saw the world, and yet I was not seen. My thread is cut, and yet it is not spun. And now I live, and now my life is done. I sought my death and found it in my womb. I looked for life, and saw it was a shade. I trod the earth, and knew it was my tomb. And now I die, and now I was but made. My glass is full, and now my glass is run. And now I live, and now my life is done. And now 2 poems by John Donne. The first is the 10th in his Holy Sonnets series. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou think'st thou dost overthrow die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure, then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones, and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. And now a famous piece by John Donne. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. And now a poem by Anne Finch, this titled To Death. O King of terrors, whose unbounded sway all that have life must certainly obey, the king, the priest, the prophet, all are thine, nor would even God in flesh thy stroke decline. My name is on thy roll, and sure I must increase thy gloomy kingdom in the dust. My soul at this no apprehension feels, but trembles at thy swords, thy racks, thy wheels, thy scorching fevers, which distract the sense and snatch us raving, unprepared from hence. At thy contagion darts that wound the heads of weeping friends who wait at dying beds. Spare these, and let thy time be when it will. My business is to die, and thine to kill. Gently thy fatal scepter on me lay, and take to thy cold arms insensibly thy prey. And now more joyous piece by William Cowper. This written to his bunny, one of his 3 bunnies. Tiny. One little Tiny passed away. He also mentions another of his still living rabbits in the piece. That rabbit's name is Puss. Epitaph on a Hare by William Cowper. Here lies, whom hound did ne'er pursue, nor swifter greyhound follow, whose foot ne'er tainted morning dew, nor ear heard huntsman's hollow. Old Tiny, surliest of his kind, who, nursed with tender care, and to domestic bounds confined, was still a wild jack-hare. Though dully from my hand he took his pittance every night, he did it with a jealous look, and, when he could, would bite. His diet was of wheaten bread, and milk, and oats, and straw, thistles, or lettuces instead, with sand to scour his maw. On twigs of hawthorn he regaled, on pippin's russet peel, and, when his juicy salads failed, sliced carrot pleased him well. A turkey carpet was his lawn, whereon he loved to bound, to skip and gambol like a fawn, and swing his rump around. His frisking was at evening hours, for then he lost his fear, but most before approaching showers, or when a storm drew near. 8 years and 5 round rolling moons he thus saw steal away, dozing out all his idle noons, and every night at play. I kept him for his humour's sake, for he would oft beguile my heart of thoughts that made it ache, and force me to a smile. But now, beneath this walnut shade, he finds his long last home, and waits in snug concealment laid, till gentler puss shall come. He, still more aged, feels the shocks from which no care can save, and, partner once of Tiny's box, must soon partake his grave. And now a poem by Philip Freneau called The Indian Burying Ground. In spite of all the learned have said, I still my opinion keep. The posture that we give the dead points out the soul's eternal sleep. Not so the ancients of these lands. The Indian, when from life released, again is seated with his friends, and shares again the joyous feast. His imaged birds and painted bowl, and venison, for a journey dressed, bespeak the nature of the soul, activity that knows no rest. His bow, for action ready bent, and arrows, with a head of stone, can only mean that life is spent, and not the old ideas gone. Thou stranger, thou shalt come this way, no fraud upon the dead commit. Observe the swelling turf, and say they do not lie, but here they sit. Here still a lofty rock remains, on which the curious eye may trace, now wasted half, by wearing rains, the fancies of a ruder race. Here still an aged elm aspires, beneath whose far projecting shade, and which the shepherd still admires, the children of the forest played. There oft a restless Indian queen, pale Sheba, with her braided hair, and many a barbarous form is seen to chide the man that lingers there. By midnight moons, or moistening dews, in habit for the chase arrayed, the hunter still the deer pursues, the hunter and the deer, a shade. And long shall timorous fancy see the painted chief, and pointed spear, and reason's self shall bow the knee to shadows and delusions here. And now, one of the favorite poems of my youth by William Blake. The Tyger. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder, and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand, and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? And now two works by Lord Byron. The first, written at the beginning of the last year of his life. He had gone to Greece to support the Greek War for Independence in 1824. This poem is titled, "On this day I complete my 36th year," written in Missolonghi, January 22nd, 1824. "'Tis time this heart should be unmoved, since others it hath ceased to move. Yet, though I cannot be beloved, still let me love. My days are in the yellow leaf, the flowers and fruits of love are gone, the worm, the canker, and the grief are mine alone. The fire that on my bosom preys is lone as some volcanic isle, no torch is kindled at its blaze, a funeral pile. The hope, the fear, the jealous care, the exalted portion of the pain and power of love I cannot share, but wear the chain. But 'tis not thus, and 'tis not here, such thoughts should shake my soul, nor now, where glory decks the hero's bier, or binds his brow. The sword, the banner, and the field, glory and Greece around me see. The Spartan, borne upon his shield, was not more free. Awake, not Greece, she is awake. Awake, my spirit, think through whom thy lifeblood tracks its parent lake, and then strike home. Tread those reviving passions down, unworthy manhood. Unto thee indifferent should the smile or frown of beauty be. If thou regrettest thy youth, why live? The land of honorable death is here. Up to the field, and give away thy breath. Seek out, less often sought than found, a soldier's grave, for thee the best, then look around, and choose thy ground, and take thy rest." And now, Epitaph to a Dog by Lord Byron. Near this spot are deposited the remains of one who possessed beauty without vanity, strength without insolence, courage without ferocity, and all the virtues of man without his vices. This praise, which would be unmeaning flattery if inscribed over human ashes, is but a just tribute to the memory of Boatswain, a dog, who was born in Newfoundland, May 1803, and died at Newstead, November 18th, 1808. When some proud son of man returns to earth, unknown to glory but upheld by birth, the sculptor's art exhausts the pomp of woe, and storied urns record who rests below. When all is done, upon the tomb is seen not what he was, but what he should have been. But the poor dog, in life the firmest friend, the first to welcome, foremost to defend, whose honest heart is still his master's own, who labors, fights, lives, breathes for him alone, unhonored falls, unnoticed all his worth, denied in heaven the soul he held on earth, while man, vain insect, hopes to be forgiven, and claims himself a soul exclusive heaven. O man, thou feeble tenant of an hour, debased by slavery, or corrupt by power, who knows thee well must quit thee with disgust, degraded mass of animated dust. Thy love is lust, thy friendship all a cheat, thy tongue hypocrisy, thy heart deceit, by nature vile, ennobled but by name, each kindred brute might bid thee blush for shame. Ye, who behold perchance this simple urn, pass on. It honors none you wish to mourn. To mark a friend's remains, these stones arise. I never knew but one, and here he lies. And now a dainty poem by Robert Frost. Called Astrometaphysical. Lord, I have loved your sky, be it said against or for me, have loved it clear and high, or low and stormy, till I have reeled and stumbled from looking up too much, and fallen and been humbled to wear a crutch. My love for every heaven o'er which you, Lord, have lorded, from number 1 to 7, should be rewarded. It may not give me hope that when I am translated, my scalp will in the cope be constellated. But if that seems to tend to my undue renown, at least it ought to send me up, not down. Now, 2 poems by Sylvia Plath. The first titled Sonnet to Time. Today we move in jade and cease with garnet, amid the ticking jeweled clocks that mark our years. Death comes in a casual steel car, yet we vaunt our days in neon and scorn the dark. But outside the diabolic steel of this most plastic windowed city, I can hear the lone wind raving in the gutter, his voice crying exclusion in my ear. So cry for the pagan girl left picking olives beside a sun-blue sea, and mourn the flagon raised to toast 1,000 kings, for all gives sorrow. Weep for the legendary dragon. Time is a great machine of iron bars that drains eternally the milk of stars. And this one, which begins, Insolent storm strikes at the skull, by Sylvia Plath. Insolent storm strikes at the skull, assaults the sleeping citadel, knocking the warden to his knees in impotence, to sue for peace, while wantonly amused by this, wind wakes the whole metropolis. Skeptic cyclones try the bone of strict and sacred skeleton. Polemic gales prove point by point how flesh cleaves fast to frozen joint, and a hurricane headache rocks the temples of the orthodox. Abracadabra of the rain drowns Noah's prayers with disdain, drives priest and prostitute in doorways, bereft of Moses and of mores. No ancient blueprint builds an ark to navigate this final dark. River floods transcend the level, demarcating good from evil, and casuist arguments run riot, inundating Eden's quiet. All absolutes that angels give flounder in the relative. Lightning conjures God's globe off its orbit. Neither law nor prophets can rectify truant intent to double-cross the firmament. Now earth rejects communication with heaven's autocratic station and violates celestial custom by seceding from the solar system. Scintillant irony inspires independent rebel fires, till the announcer's voice is lost in heresies of Holocaust. And now a short piece by Gwendolyn B. Bennett, titled Epitaph. When I am dead, carve this upon my stone. Here lies a woman, fit root for flower and tree, whose living flesh, now mouldering round the bone, wants nothing more than this for immortality, that in her heart, where love so long unfruited lay, a seed for grass or weed shall grow, and push to light and air its heedless way. That she who lies here dead may know, through all the putrid marrow of her bones, the searing pangs of birth, while none may know the pains nor hear the groans of she who lived with barrenness upon the earth. Now a poem by one of the greatest poets who ever lived, Edna St. Vincent Millay. With a Latin title, Passer Mortuus Est. Death devours all lovely things. Lesbia with her sparrow shares the darkness. Presently every bed is narrow. Unremembered as old rain dries the sheer libation, and the little petulant hand is annotation. After all, my erstwhile dear, my no longer cherished, need we say it was not love, just because it perished? And now a poem by the lutist, John Dowland, from 1600, which I discovered in a Philip K. Dick book titled Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. This poem by Dowland is titled Flow My Tears. Flow my tears, fall from your springs, exiled forever, let me mourn. Where night's black bird her sad infamy sings, there let me live forlorn. Down, vain lights, shine you no more. No nights are dark enough for those that in despair their last fortunes deplore. Light doth but shame disclose. Never may my woes be relieved, since pity is fled, and tears and sighs and groans my weary days of all joys have deprived. From the highest spire of contentment my fortune is thrown, and fear and grief and pain for my deserts are my hopes, since hope is gone. Hark, you shadows that in darkness dwell, learn to contemn the light. Happy, happy they that in hell feel not the world's despite. And now a poem of mine to Chris. Kindness is given, friendship is earned, students are tutored, lessons are learned, jokes on the table tend to get told. If you're unable, maybe you're old. Dying is easy, driving is hard. One day you're here and the next you're a card. If you are grieving, look to the bard. If you're still breathing, get in the yard. And now a poem from the bard. Sonnet number 60. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequent toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked eclipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time, that gave, doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope, my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. And now we'll read a couple of apt speeches from Hamlet. The first, Polonius's words to Laertes. Just start at the beginning of his words. Yet here, Laertes, aboard, aboard, for the wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There, my blessing with you. And these few precepts in thy memory, see thou thy character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unapportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. The friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but, being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thine ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy. Rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are most select and generous, chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell. My blessing season this in thee. And now, of course, Hamlet's famous speech. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of? Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in the orisons, be all my sins remembered. And now a very short poem, one of my favorites, by Dorothy Parker, called Resume. Razors pain you, rivers are damp, acids stain you, and drugs cause cramp. Guns aren't lawful, nooses give, gas smells awful, you might as well live. And now a short parable from Soren Kierkegaard, called The Early Finish. Is the task of becoming a self ever completed? When in a written examination the youth are allotted 4 hours to develop a theme, then it is neither here nor there if an individual student happens to finish before the time is up or uses the entire time. Here, therefore, the task is one thing, the time another. But when the time itself is the task, it becomes a fault to finish before the time has transpired. Suppose a man were assigned the task of entertaining himself for an entire day, and he finishes this task of self-entertainment as early as noon. Then his celerity would not be meritorious. So also when life constitutes the task. To be finished with life before life has finished with one is precisely not to have finished the task. Now a poem by John Clare, written while he was committed in an asylum in Northampton County. I am, yet what I am none cares or knows. My friends forsake me like a memory lost. I am the self-consumer of my woes. They rise and vanish in oblivion's host, like shades in love and death's oblivion lost. And yet I am, and live with shadows tossed. Into the nothingness of scorn and noise, into the living sea of waking dreams, where there is neither sense of life nor joys, but the vast shipwreck of my life's esteems. And even the dearest that I loved the best are strange, nay, rather stranger than the rest. I long for scenes where man has never trod, a place where woman never smiled or wept, there to abide with my Creator, God, and sleep as I in childhood sweetly slept, untroubling and untroubled where I lie, the grass below, above the vaulted sky. And now a rather celebrated poem by William Ernest Henley called Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance I have not winced, nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And now, one of my favorite chapters of the Tao Te Ching by one of my favorite, probably my favorite translator, Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching. This is chapter 16. Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you are ready. Maybe one episode we'll just read this thing from cover to cover. So make sure to subscribe for that. We have a few more left. Now we'll read The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, Hardly are those words out when a vast image of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert a shape with lion body and the head of a man, and gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. I love when I buy used books and there's tons of marginalia. And now a poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Apposite to the previous poem, called Sometime During Eternity. Sometime during eternity, some guys show up, and one of them who shows up real late is a kind of carpenter from some square-type place like Galilee, and he starts wailing and claiming he is hip to who made heaven and earth, and that the cat who really laid it on us is his dad. And moreover, he adds, it's all written down on some scroll-type parchments, which some henchmen leave lying around the Dead Sea somewheres a long time ago, and which you won't even find for a couple of thousand years or so, or at least for 1947 of them, to be exact. And even then, nobody really believes them, or me for that matter. You're hot, they tell him, and they cool him. They stretch him on the tree to cool, and everybody after that is always making models of this tree, with him hung up, and always crooning his name, and calling him to come down and sit in on their combo, as if he is the king cat who's got to blow, or they can't quite make it. Only he don't come down from his tree. Him just hang there, on his tree, looking real petered out, and real cool, and also, according to a roundup of late world news from the usual unreliable sources, real dead. And now, two poems by Philip Larkin. The first titled An Arundel Tomb. Side by side, their faces blurred, the Earl and Countess lie in stone, their proper habits vaguely shown as jointed armor, stiffened pleat, and that faint hint of the absurd, the little dogs under their feet. Excuse me. Such plainness of the pre-Baroque hardly involves the eye until it meets his left-hand gauntlet, still clasped empty in the other, and one sees with a sharp, tender shock his hand withdrawn, holding her hand. They would not think to lie so long. Such faithfulness in effigy was just a detail friends would see, a sculptor's sweet commissioned grace thrown off in helping to prolong the Latin names around the base. They would not guess how early in their supine stationary voyage the air would change to soundless damage, turn the old tenantry away, how soon succeeding eyes begin to look, not read. Rigidly they persisted, linked through lengths and breadths of time. Snow fell, undated. Light each summer thronged the glass. A bright litter of bird calls strewed the same bone-riddled ground. And up the paths the endless altered people came, washing at their identity. Now, helpless in the hollow of an unarmorial age, a trough of smoke in slow suspended skeins. Above their scrap of history, only an attitude remains. Time has transfigured them into untruth. The stone fidelity they hardly meant has come to be their final blazon, and to prove our almost instinct almost true, what will survive of us is love. And now a famous poem by Larkin called This Be the Verse. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra, just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. And now the final piece, a short story by maybe my favorite author, David Foster Wallace, called Incarnations of Burned Children. I need a couple of breaths. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for bearing with me with these poems. This is my present to myself. And stick with us next week. I have a lighter theme in mind. Incarnations of Burned Children by David Foster Wallace. The daddy was around the side of the house hanging a door for the tenant when he heard the child's screams and the mommy's voice gone high between them. He could move fast, and the back porch gave onto the kitchen, and before the screen door had banged shut behind him, the daddy had taken the whole scene in, the overturned pot on the floor tile before the stove, and the burner's blue jet, and the floor's pool of water still steaming as its many arms extended, the toddler in his baggy diaper, standing rigid with steam coming off his hair, and his chest and shoulders scarlet, and his eyes rolled up, and mouth open very wide, and seeming somehow separate from the sounds that issued, the mommy down on one knee, with the dish rag dabbing pointlessly at him, and matching the screams with cries of her own, hysterical so she was almost frozen. Her one knee and the bare little soft feet were still in the steaming pool, and the daddy's first act was to take the child under the arms and lift him away from it and take him to the sink, where he threw out plates and struck the tap to let cold well water run over the boy's feet, while with his cupped hand he gathered and poured or flung more cold water over his head and shoulders and chest, wanting first to see the steam stop coming off him, the mommy over his shoulder invoking God until he sent her for towels and gauze, and if they had it, the daddy moving quickly and well, and his man's mind empty of everything but purpose, not yet aware of how smoothly he moved, or that he'd ceased to hear the high screams, because to hear them would freeze him and make impossible what had to be done to help his child, whose screams were regular as breath, and went on so long that they'd become already a thing in the kitchen, something else to move quickly around. The tenant side's door outside hung half off its top hinge and moved slightly in the wind, and a bird in the oak across the driveway appeared to observe the door with a cocked head, as the cries still came from inside. The worst scald seemed to be right under the arm and shoulder. The chest and stomach's red was fading to pink under the cold water, and his feet's soft soles weren't blistered that the daddy could see. But the toddler still made little fists and screamed, except now merely on reflex, from fear the daddy would know, he thought later possible. Small face distended and thready veins standing out at the temples, and the daddy kept saying, "He was here, he was here," adrenaline ebbing in an anger at the mommy for allowing this thing to happen, just starting to gather in wisps at his mind's extreme rear, still hours from expression. When the mommy returned, he wasn't sure whether to wrap the child in a towel or not, but he wet the towel down and did, swaddled him tight, and lifted his baby out of the sink and set him on the kitchen table's edge to soothe him while the mommy tried to check the feet soles with one hand, waving around in the area of her mouth and uttering objectless words, while the daddy bent in and was face to face with the child on the table's checkered edge, repeating the fact that he was here and trying to calm the toddler's cries, but still the child breathlessly screamed, a high, pure, shining sound that could stop his heart, and his bitty lips and gums now tinged with the light blue of a low flame, the daddy thought, screaming as if almost still under the tilted pot in pain. A minute, two like this that seemed much longer, with the mommy at the daddy's side talking sing-song at the child's face, and the lark on the limb with its head to the side, and the hinge going white in a line from the weight of the canted door until the first wisp of steam came lazy from under the wrapped towel's hem, and the parents' eyes met and widened. The diaper, which when they opened the towel and leaned their little boy back on the checkered cloth and unfastened the softened tabs and tried to remove it, resisted slightly with new high cries and was hot. Their baby's diaper burned their hand, and they saw where the real water had fallen and pooled. And had been burning their baby all this time while he had screamed for them to help him, and they hadn't thought. And when they got it off and saw the state of what was there, the mommy said their God's first name. And grabbed the table to keep her feet while the father turned away and threw a haymaker at the air of the kitchen and cursed both himself and the world for not the last time, while his child might now have been sleeping, if not for the rate of his breathing and the tiny stricken motions of his hands in the air above where he lay, hands the size of a grown man's thumb that had clutched the daddy's thumb in the crib while he'd watched the daddy's mouth move in song, his head cocked and seeming to see way past him into something his eyes made the daddy lonesome for in a strange, vague way. If you've never wept and want to, have a child. Break your heart inside and something will, a child, is the twangy song the daddy hears again, as if the lady was almost there with him, looking down at what they've done. Though hours later, what the daddy won't most forgive is how badly he wanted a cigarette right then, as they diapered the child as best they could in gauze and 2 crossed hand towels, and the daddy lifted him like a newborn with his skull in one palm and ran him out to the hot truck and burned custom rubber all the way to town, and the clinic's ER with the tenant's door hanging open like that all day until the hinge gave, but by then it was too late. When it wouldn't stop and they couldn't make it, the child had learned to leave himself and watch the whole rest unfold from a point overhead, and whatever was lost never thenceforth mattered, and the child's body expanded, and walked about, and drew pay, and lived its life untenanted, a thing among things, itself soul so much vapor aloft, falling as rain, and then rising, the sun up and down like a yo-yo. Thank you all for sitting with me. Have a great year. Be kind to each other.